Hi, everybody. Coach Tiffany here. So, today we're going to talk about sex and intuitive eating. And so, I want to ask, do you have as much pleasure in your life as you would like? Are you enjoying your sex life? Are you satisfied with your current sex life, whether you're solo and your sex life is self pleasure time, or whether you are in relationships or experiencing sex with other people, um, and enjoying that time? I'm really curious how that is, feeling for you, if you're satisfied with it. So part of my personal journey is that I've always been, a sexual person and enjoyed sex and pleasure, but I definitely felt some things were lacking, and I didn't always feel connected to pleasure or like it was accessible to me. So for a lot of years, I was, um, not only dieting, but I also was experiencing a lot of burnout, a lot of physical pain. I was very disconnected from my body. And so through intuitive eating, I started to have a much more attuned relationship with my body. And so I was much more connected to what was happening in my body. And that meant that I was really able to feel pleasure at a different level. And it also meant that, I was able to recognize when there were barriers to having the life that I really wanted. So I was able to recognize when I was experiencing depression, what my pain really felt like in my body. And I was then really motivated to address that pain and what kind of barriers that pain created to being connected to my body. And so after doing intuitive eating for some time, I also had more body acceptance and felt braver about, exploring sexually with people. And at the time, I had a spouse, exploring with him and exploring sex with myself. So I'm going to actually publicly admit this. I don't know if I have publicly admitted this before, but it took me until 38 or 39. So I'm about to be 42. So it's about 3 or 4 years ago to actually have to start having orgasms just using self touch only. And so I was only having orgasms either through very specific types of sex with my spouse or through using like a vibrator or something like that. And I wasn't using them very often. So it was almost exclusively using or almost exclusively only having orgasms when I was with my partner, and my partner was putting in the effort that it took to have an orgasm. And so, I definitely felt like it wasn't as much as I wanted. And it wasn't until after I started doing intuitive eating and getting that sense of body attunement, getting a lot more curious about my body, letting go of shame, having, more. Of a relationship with my body, more connection with my body, that I was like, why am I not experiencing this? Like, I know I can have orgasms, um, but I'm just not having this experience. And so I started doing some research and figured it out. Um, there's a website called OMG Yes, and that is a great website for working on different types of self pleasure, exploring different types of sex, different sexual acts. And it's really an educational tool for women, but they actually show you, like in a drawing, like they'll show you like, okay, do this motion. And then they have videos of women actually doing the that type of self pleasure, like the actual anatomy, them actually doing it. And so know that for some that could be activating if you have trauma around sex. Know that may not be the place for you, but if it feels safe to you, it's a great resource. So I highly recommend. Anyway, so going back to my intuitive eating journey, after I started eating intuitively, having a more secure relationship with myself and with my body, being more connected and more attuned to my body, then I really started having more desire and wanting to experience more pleasure. And so, my sex drive actually increased. Oh, I know I keep kind of having all of these segues, but I also was well nourished, so I wasn't so exhausted. I had more of an abundance of energy, and this really created a really beautiful opening for me in um, connecting to my sexuality and exploring it more and experiencing more pleasure. So it wasn't just about orgasms. That was kind of a side note of like, yeah, I had been really limited and didn't feel like I could, figure out how to pleasure myself in that way. But it's much more comprehensive than that. It's much more about enjoying, these all of the aspects of our bodies and really allowing more pleasure. We're so focused oftentimes in diet culture on controlling and managing our body and trying to make it contort it to fit this ideal standard. And we're much less connected to, what do I feel like in my body? What do I want to feel like in my body? How much pleasure do I want to experience? Like more, please. Yes, please. Right. So yeah, so I actually found through intuitive eating and through body attunement and that secure attachment with myself that my capacity for pleasure and my kind of sexual experience um, could be really increased and really enhanced. And I was able to prioritize it a lot more when it felt safe to do so, when I didn't feel shame around my body, when I felt acceptance over all of my, all my folds and rolls and dimples and, all the things. And when I had the bandwidth, because I wasn't spending all of my time, my mental and emotional energy obsessing over food, trying to control and manage that, right? Then I had bandwidth for other things. And again, I was well nourished, so I had more actual energy. It's amazing how much having energy will increase your, add energy to your sex life. So, yeah, so this has kind of been my experience with intuitive eating and sexuality. And I can't remember their name right now off the top of my head, but there was a person who was researching the connection between intuitive eating and sexuality and how, some people are really seeing the benefits of intuitive eating in their relationship with their body, and that relationship with their body improving is improving their sex life. So pretty fun, pretty cool. I'll try to get that in the and put it in the resources for you, but I'm not sure if her paper's out yet. The last thing I want to say here is that I really found that sent me on another journey. And so I actually ended up um, deciding to leave my marriage, which I wouldn't say is because of intuitive eating or because of this expansion in my sexuality, but I left my marriage and I really wanted to grow in this area and explore this more. And so I did end up working with a sex coach. Her name's Jessie Fresh. She's a pretty incredible person. And for some people, when we start diving into their intuitive eating journey and their body attunement, you may find that you aren't satisfied in this way. And for whatever reason, we don't talk about it. And so I was really fortunate to meet Jessie at just the right time. And she is trained in a method called, well, the coursework is called the Erotic Freedom um, course, and it was created by Jaya. Jaya was just on what is it, Goop Sex and something. She does the energetic orgasm part. I think I haven't watched the whole thing yet, but I just saw that she was on there and was like, that's so exciting. So similar to the way that I have the food attachment model and the food attachment styles, and you can take my quiz online. You can take the quiz on Jessie's website or on Jaya's website and find out what your sexual blueprint type is. It's kind of like your love language for sex. And you can find coaches through the Erotic Freedom Club or work with Jessie if you're interested in getting support in those ways. But I did find that just simply becoming more attuned with my body and getting curious about my body and prioritizing, pleasure over like restriction and diet and all of that misery, shame, right, really made a huge difference in my life. And so I would encourage y'all to, start to explore that as you become more in tune with your body and allow that to be part of your journey, because pleasure is so good for our nervous systems. It's so good for our relationships. It's so good for your heart health. It's really good for your health, and it just feels amazing. So go out there, get yourself some pleasure, and hopefully this will help you to see some more of the benefits of moving away from diet culture and weight stigma and shame and restriction and all those kind of negative aspects of that culture. All right, thank you so much. And if you're curious to take the food attachment style quiz, if you want to know like how that's showing up in your life and how to start to shift your intuitive eating into intuitive eating, that is at coachtiffany.rn.com/quiz. Thank you.